Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take sources, find the key takeaways, and get you informed fast. Today, we're doing something really interesting. We're diving into some very direct material. It's excerpts from a YouTube transcript about life and the economy in Accra, Ghana. Very raw stuff. Our mission here is to kind of unpack what this source shows us, try to understand the why behind what the narrator sees, and what being resourceful really means in that context. Okay, let's unpack this. It feels like a very unfiltered look.
It really is. It's unfiltered, sort of a ground-level perspective on some big, complex issues. The observations are quite stark, and we'll just explore them as they're presented in the source.
Right. And, well, right off the bat, the source gives us this core idea that really sets everything up. It says, and I'm quoting here, Ghana has literally everything. Land, grape soil, cocoa, just name it. But then you hear about hunger. It seems like a massive contradiction, doesn't it?
Yeah, what's really striking is how the narrator immediately shifts from just having resources to needing to be resourceful. It's a key distinction they make right away. And, this observation really brings to mind that whole concept of the resource curse.
Ah, right. Where having resources doesn't automatically mean wealth for everyone.
Exactly. It's this paradox where resource-rich countries often struggle with growth or inequality. The narrator's point here feels like a very real, lived example of that. Just having the stuff isn't enough. It's about managing it, distributing it.
And then, almost in the same breath, the narrator makes this really strong statement about dependency on outsiders. They claim Ghana heavily relies on Europe, America, China. He even mentions the diasporans, meaning the diaspora, Ghanaians living abroad, and goes so far as to say Ghana would have actually collapsed long ago without them. That's quite a statement.
It is a stark claim, and as the source frames it, it paints a picture where the nation's survival feels deeply tied to these external forces. The narrator actually says they'd love for Ghana to be free from the dominance of America, Europe, China, but concludes it just can't survive without them.
So it suggests this isn't just helpful aid, but perceived as totally essential.
That seems to be the perspective in the source, yes. It points towards this long history, maybe, and current reality where that external help and influence are seen as fundamental, hints at those global power dynamics.
Okay, so that's the external picture. But what about looking inward? Where does the narrator focus then?
Well, the focus shifts pretty sharply to internal governance, and the opinion there is incredibly critical. The source quotes someone saying the government is literally useless and does not think about them. That's a powerful feeling to capture.
Wow, useless. That's strong stuff.
It is, and there's this pot maker in the video, right? He echoes it. He says, they don't think about us. And he has specific asks, like wanting subsidies for money in the minerals, like aluminium.
So there's a clear expectation of what the government should be doing.
Exactly, and a real sense of disappointment that it's not happening. According to the people in the source, it suggests maybe a lack of capacity or perhaps resources going elsewhere, a feeling of being unsupported.
And interestingly, the narrator then offers their own definition of what government is for. They say it's about electing people, building infrastructure, creating systems, providing resources so people can then help themselves. A supportive role.
Right, which contrasts sharply with the perceived reality being described. And this raises that important question, doesn't it, about the disconnect. When people feel their government isn't fulfilling that core purpose, trust breaks down. They feel like their well-being isn't the priority.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The narrator makes this point about Ghana's resources. They say these resources belong to every single citizen, not just, the politicians and their connections. And then this huge accusation that politicians have ripped Ghanaians off, that they've scammed them. Why? Because, quote, most Ghanaians do not know much about their right to a share of the nation's revenue.
That is a pivotal claim in the source material. It's suggesting a really deep systemic issue, like the fundamental idea that citizens have a right to their nation's wealth has been obscured or ignored.
Which then feeds into the poverty cycle, even with all those resources we talked about.
Precisely. The narrator seems to be arguing that if people knew and could claim those rights, the whole economic picture could change dramatically. It's a strong indictment of, perceived corruption and a real lack of transparency.
But amidst all this critique of systems and government, the source also shows us these moments of incredible resilience, like individuals just getting on with it. The story of the young man making cooking pots from aluminum on the beach really stands out.
It's a very vivid picture, isn't it? Raw entrepreneurship. The source describes his whole process, the mold, pouring the hot metal, cooling it with water right there. Simple, direct.
And he's been doing it for, more than 20-something years?
Yeah, and he calls it manpower. Says it's a good profit business.
Yeah.
What the source really seems to highlight there is the informal economy kicking in. When the formal systems aren't there, people create their own ways to survive, even thrive sometimes on that small scale.
He's basically embodying that resourcefulness the narrator mentioned at the start, isn't he? Just pure effort. But then the source connects it back to the government critique.
Right.
The narrator asks, why isn't someone like him getting help? If he had support, maybe some resources, he could build a factory, create jobs. It frames it as a huge missed opportunity from the narrator's viewpoint.
Absolutely. The source draws that line directly. Individual drive is there, but scaling it up needs support. It suggests these sparks of entrepreneurship could really ignite something bigger if the environment was right. Subsidies, investment, whatever. It underlines that resourcefulness isn't just about grit, it's also about the systems around you.
And it's not just individuals working alone. The source also mentions community efforts, like those public shower facilities.
Yes, that's another example, describing how the community come together and put these facilities in place for everybody to use, and people pay to use them. It's self-organization filling a basic need.
So again, stepping in where the state is perceived to be absent.
It seems to be the implication. Communities pooling resources, creating services, even with a small fee attached. It shows that local agency, that collective action, finding solutions outside the formal structures.
Okay, let's shift back to that bigger global picture for a moment. The source brings up foreign reliance again, describing young men begging United Nations and the European Union for help. It really drives home that sense of dependency the narrator observed earlier.
It does, and the narrator adds a layer of critique to that, suggesting the motives behind the aid aren't purely altruistic, stating that the interest of United Nations is more for Europe and America and countries that contribute the most.
So a kind of cynical view, that aid follows the money and influence.
That's the perspective presented in the source, yes. It questions those power dynamics in international aid, suggesting self-interest plays a big role.
So what does this all mean then? Especially when you consider what the narrator points out next. That the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, was not mentioned by the people seeking help.
Right, that's a crucial observation they make.
Why not? The narrator says it's because the OAU is seen as useless and powerless, unable to help even if it wanted to.
That's incredibly telling about how these different bodies are perceived, according to the source. It suggests a belief that regional African organizations just don't have the clout or the will to make a real difference.
So people look elsewhere, towards those bigger non-African entities.
Apparently so, based on this account. It highlights the struggle regional bodies face in having real influence compared to the perceived power of global players. It paints this picture of, well, looking outwards, not inwards, for solutions.
This has been quite the exploration, really digging into a complex situation through this one specific lens. We've seen the paradox. Ghana's wealth versus hunger, the deep reliance on foreign powers, that sharp critique of the government, but also that incredible resilience, individuals and communities finding ways. The source gives such a raw feel for all these tangled issues.
It really does. It's not just numbers. It's lived experience, perceived injustice, and that grassroots ingenuity. It shows how multi-layered development really is.
So reflecting on everything we've unpacked from this source, here's something for you to think about. Given everything described, the resources, the external pressures, the internal governance issues, what does it actually take for a nation like Ghana to truly harness its own wealth for all its people? That's the big question, isn't it?